Afternoon, I'd like to welcome everyone to our council meeting of December 10th. And I'd like to officially call the meeting to order, and the time is 1 p.m. To start with, we'll begin with our land acknowledgement and a moment of silent reflection.
As a keeper of history and stories and are a source of inspiration. In recognizing this, we engage that all living things possess an important and purpose.
I'll ask the councillors declaration of pecuniary interest, and I know that Councillor Hodge-Reeves,
Excuse me, C15.
C15. Anyone else? No? Okay, may I get a motion to approve today's agenda as circulated or amended? Councillor Walsh.
As circulated.
As circulated, and Councillor Ward. All in favor? Motion is carried. Approval of the prior meeting minutes. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the regular meeting minutes of November 26th as presented or amended. Deputy Mayor Burt.
As presented.
As presented. Seconder. Councillor Ward. All in favor? Motion is carried. Business arising from the minutes. Do we have any business arising? None? Okay, moving along to consent agenda, through that, and reports. R1. Consent agenda, sorry. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda, please? Deputy Mayor Burt.
To receive comments.
Receive with a comment. Second by Councillor Walsh.
Well.
All right, Councillor Burt.
I'd like to pull C1, C2, and R1.
All right. All in favor of that motion? Anybody else have any? No. I asked earlier. All right, thank you. Move along with reports then. And I'll let you comment first on C1.
Yeah, just
C2.
on the, just on the C1, with certainly the confirmation of the amount from the OPP that we will be receiving for 2022.
Okay. CAOL.
So through you, Mayor. The notification we have received is that we are going to get $111,134 from which we're not quite a wash from 2024. We're looking at an increase of approximately $27,000, so about $2,287.84 a month. But compared to what we would have had, we're going to come in around 678,000, and we would have been at 789,000 if we hadn't got the grant profits. Now, the piece I would point out for everybody, and I mentioned this to a couple of councilors already, is that this deals with 2025, and that's great, and we thank the province for that. It does not deal with anything going past that. And I don't think this issue is going to be going anywhere anytime soon, so it is one to keep an eye on.
So something that we kind of need to keep the pressure on as we go forward. Good, thank you.
Councilor Ward?
Thank you for you, Mayor, just to follow up on that. So you said the initial amount, what would that have been, in a percentage of increase if we hadn't had assistance from the province?
It would have been probably closer to $10,000 to $11,000 a month more than the 2,000, or right now it's gonna be $2,000 a month more. It would have been more like about $11,000 to $12,000 a month more.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it would have been probably at least minimum 1% on the tax levy, probably a little bit more than that, without the calculator in front of me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. And you wanted to comment on C1,
C2.
or sorry, C2?
Yeah, and actually Ed's not here, but that's fine. I'll, through you, Mayor. With the additional residential units and the changes that the province brought down, I don't think there's a lot of changes that will be coming, that will happen at the township, because I think we're pretty flexible with those ARUs. I just wanted
Through
to,
you, Mayor. Yeah, the chief building personnel chatted, at this point, we're not anticipating any big impacts on us at all.
okay. Didn't think so, but I just wanted to double check that.
Any further comments? R1?
And R1, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much.
No.
Sorry about that. R1, just the changes to the ambulance dispatch, a comment, I think it's needed. There, I have a number of, family members as first responders, and I think the changes are needed, but I'm just wondering, as we get into Q1 and Q2 next year, would the fire chief be able to just bring a report forward or just not even a report, just to let us know if the changes to this dispatch affects our local fire department? Or do you know offhand what that looks like moving
So-
forward?
Through you, Mayor, I've had that question with a couple other counselors, and sort of the answer I've been given right now is that we kind of need to see how it unfolds. We're not expecting anything big, but we would like to see it unfold, and probably at the end of Q2, we can bring back something, even just a bit of an update and say this is the difference. Yeah, we're not anticipating a whole lot, but it would be nice to actually have that first 6 months so we can make a fair comment.
Good, thank you.
As my comments to Alan were very quite similar to yours. Until they change the paging system, I cannot see where it's gonna save us on the fire department. They're still going to be sending the fire department to these calls that aren't as important as what the ambulances are categorizing them all up. So we'll see in the future till the paging system is changed. Any further comments?
Guys,
Councilor Waldron?
and through you, Mayor, and actually, Deputy Mayor Birch, were you comment on the ones I had C1 as well, just around the OPP funding, and it is good news, but as you said, it's good news for 2025. We're going on until 2026. And the second comment was around R1, and again, the changes to the ambulance dispatch, very similar to actually to both of you in terms of what it can impact, what it have for our fire department. And I guess the other piece that I'd asked Alan, again, until we kind of get into it, was there is going to be a change. There's in the report indicated that there could be some delays for people receiving ambulance service, and I'm not sure that's something we want to communicate social media wise, to say there has been a change to the process, which may result in some people, slower service coming. It's still coming, but it is on a new rating system. So just some food for thought.
Okay. So we have a mover and seconder of the consent agenda. All in favor? The motion is carried. Delegations. We have 3 presentations scheduled for today, and to start with, we'll have Sarah Groves of Impact, please.
Good to go. Good to gossip. Okay. Good afternoon, council. My name is Sarah Groves and I'm an account manager with the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. And together with my account support coordinator, we support all of the municipalities within the county of Peterborough, the county of Haliburton, the city of Peterborough, and the city of Portland Lakes. So what I want you to come away from today with is just a greater understanding of the property assessment and tax system, as well as all of the resources that are available to you and to property owners. Next slide, please. So there are 4 key players in the property assessment and taxation system within Ontario, and each have a different role and interest in the process. First is the provincial government, who is responsible for setting assessment and taxation legislation and the policies. Then MPAC's main role is to determine the current value assessment of all properties in Ontario, and we then provide an assessment role to each of the municipalities. Municipalities determine your budget requirements and set the tax rates in order to collect property taxes to pay for municipal services. Municipalities apply the tax rate to MPAC's assessed value, and that is the amount of taxes approximately each property will be responsible for. And the ratepayer or the property owner pays the property tax. And there are also a key role in that seller or purchaser of property, because those sales transactions do determine and inform what our current value assessments may be. Next slide, please. So monitoring the market and assessing newly built and renovated properties are things we do every day in order to keep our property data current. We also periodically update every single property assessment in Ontario based on a legislative valuation date, and we call this an assessment update or a reassessment. This is when we determine what every single property in Ontario could have reasonably sold for in its current state and condition at that particular point in time. Provincial legislation determines what that valuation date will be and sets that date for each update cycle. We can all agree that a lot has changed in the market over recent years. So the key is that once we are provided direction on the new valuation date and what that cycle will be, all properties will be valued as of that point in time. So the date and sales in and around that time will inform our values. Okay. But so Ontario's property tax system is based on everyone paying their portion of what it costs to deliver municipal and community services. To do this, all properties are assigned a value at a common valuation date, and common or the current value assessment is the market value as of a point in time, or again, that legislative valuation date. Those terms are interchangeable. It's the price a property might reasonably be expected to sell for if sold by a willing seller to a willing buyer on an open market after appropriate time and exposure. Regular revaluation of properties ensures that assessments stay up to date and that similar properties of similar value in the same municipality pay similar property taxes. Next slide, please. So as you can imagine, keeping our property database up to date is very important. Property data is continuously updated so that municipal records are accurate when municipal stakeholders are making important tax decisions. Maintaining Ontario's property database includes assessing new construction, additions, and renovations promptly. We respond to property owner inquiries and work with them to help them understand their property assessment. We support municipalities. We offer a platform called Municipal Connect, where all of the municipal staff can obtain anything assessment related that they need. We also work collaboratively on projects like digital building permitting over the last couple of years. And we have statutory duties like processing requests for reconsideration and maintaining people data for over 5.7 million properties. We also process tax applications, land severances, and consolidations as well. Next slide, please. So there are 3 approaches to valuing properties. And the first of those is the direct comparison approach, which is used primarily for residential properties, condos, and vacant land. And the township of Asphodel-Norwood is mainly made up of residential at 76% of your assessment base. So we'll take a look a little deeper at the direct comparison approach. But the other 2 are the income approach, which is used on properties like office buildings. And then we have the cost approach, which is for more general industrial properties. Okay, so no matter what the valuation approach is we use, we keep in mind that the selection of comparable sales transactions serve as the foundation for establishing the value and the assessment that we apply to a property. Next slide, please. So this slide is showcasing 5 major factors that we take into consideration when assessing those residential properties. Although we consider over 200 factors, these 5 factors make up about 85% of a property's value. These include the lot dimension, location, exterior square footage, quality of construction, and the age of the property, and it may be adjusted if there's been an addition or a renovation that has occurred. Next slide, please. So let's spend a moment to address the relationship between property tax and assessment. Assessments distribute taxes. They do not determine the taxes paid. So the most important factor is not how much the assessed value of a property has changed, but rather how that assessed value has changed relative to the average change in the class within the community, right? Next slide, please. So our focus is always on building awareness about property assessment and taxation and what MPAC's role is. And we understand that property assessment can be complex. We hear that from municipalities, we hear that from property owners. And that's why we've been communicating with property owners and Ontarians more than ever in order to help them understand their property assessment, the taxation system, learn more about who we are, and ways that they can easily find the information and resources that they need. From social media campaigns and educational videos to our first-time homeowners hub, which was launched almost exactly a year ago, where new property owners can access information to help them navigate the property assessment and tax system. We continue our efforts on providing helpful and easy to understand resources for property owners, as well as municipalities, in order for you to help answer property owners' questions. Next slide, please. Are we able to watch this?
They have
They have it? Okay, perfect. So linked here and in the PDF, you can just click on the video, it's hyperlinked in there, is a 2 to 3 minute video on how property tax is calculated. It's really easy to follow along. It's easy to understand for people that may have not had any involvement in assessment or understand assessment really. They just know what their tax bill looks like, so they can put those 2 values together. So if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend watching. As well as sharing it out with your property owners that have any questions, you're able to do that as well. Okay, next slide. So we liaise with municipalities on a regular basis. We have engagements like this. I had another one this morning with another local council. We do municipal conferences. We have all of our staff attending those. We host webinars and have training videos posted on our online YouTube site, as well as through our Municipal Connect platform for staff. And we provide ongoing support for all of these products and services. Meeting with our municipal partners is crucial to building strong relationships and understanding the communities that we serve and live in. MPAC staff work closely with municipal administration and municipal councils to educate and share valuable information. In 2023, we attended over 1,800 municipal engagements, and I know just from my area, we're at close to 100, and that just covers those counties and cities that I talked about. So that includes things like council engagements, that includes our quarterly meetings that I have with the finance staff, any engagements that I have with the building department as well. Those are all included in things like that. And in 2023, we hit about 18,000 municipal inquiries, and I know we were at about 18,000 at the beginning of November. Now that number is province-wide, but those things are like property-specific questions we may get from municipalities, mailing address updates that we process, things like plans and severances, those kind of things make up that number as well. Okay. And next slide. So on here, it does show as 2023, but in the next month or so, these 2024 reports will be available online and or shared out as well. And they highlight our accountability and transparency as a public facing organization, as well as meeting our goals and highlighting things like how we captured new assessment, customer and stakeholder engagement, and any operational efficiencies that we put into place. They highlight milestones that we've achieved together over the year in our pursuit to excellence. So once the 2024s are posted, I highly recommend you take a look, but the 2023s are there and available to be viewed now. And I think that's it. Last page is just my contact information and that of my regional manager if you'd like to reach out.
Thank you, Sarah. Council, do you have any questions? Councilor Walsh?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Sarah, thank you very much for the presentation. I've actually got 3 questions. One is, and I know it's not your call, but any rumblings on when a new assessment cycle? get started by our municipal government.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to Councilor Walsh. Right now, we are undergoing a property assessment and taxation system review that was initiated earlier this year. Until that is complete, we're not anticipating a date. So unfortunately, we don't have even a timeline on when we can expect that, but it is being reviewed actively.
And question number two
Yes.
again. So one of our earlier reports was around additional residential units that are all sitting on the one property. How do you assess them, that property? Is it one assessment, whether there's two residential units on that one lot? How do you manage, or how do you assess that?
Okay, through you, Mayor, to Councilor Walsh. It depends on what type of unit that is. If it's an additional residential unit and is considered a basement apartment, that assessment is added into the structure, that single family dwelling. If it's an additional, say, a 1 or 2 bedroom little bachelor pad outside, that has a separate assessment, but all of the assessment for the entire property is captured under one, but they are valued differently.
And one more, I can't, your video, I love that video because it really truly explains to people, because I think there's a fear that as we do a new assessment cycle, everybody's assessment's gonna go up, and they're thinking, oh my God, my taxes go up, but everything is relative. And that video, I think, really helps explain that to people, so well done, and I think it's something that you should probably share out. Because our tax bills come out, just kind of help people understand how it works. Thank you.
Just a further comment, you find a lot of your information out from the building inspectors also, right? Or chief building officials of what permits they put out so that you can.
Yes, through you. We receive monthly building permit list of all of the permits that have received an issue date, whether they've been filed or occupied, whether they've been canceled or revoked, that kind of thing. We receive those on a monthly basis. And then if we require additional information, we work with either the deputy treasurer or the staff in the building department to get the additional information that would support our visit to get that new assessment captured.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, council, can I get a motion to receive this presentation update for information? Councilor Walsh, Deputy Mayor Burke, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks
Thank
again,
you.
Sarah. Next up, we have BM Mills here to provide a status update.
You don't mind. Just tell me what to do. I think the people in the back will be able to see it, but can everyone up front see this okay?
Yes.
I know time is limited, but we will have
No.
these. Oh. Yeah, well, I'm kind of jumping out to and point and. How about here? No? I'll move over a little bit. Well, the same image is showing up on the screen, so you can follow along.
Right.
PowerPoint. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Appreciate your time today. My name is Ian Ames, the geoscientist at DM Mills, and I manage one of our environmental service lines. I'm joined today by Lindsay Tutors, who is one of our senior environmental technologists, very familiar on this project, as well as Mike Lord, who's probably stay quiet in the back, but he's our environmental services manager and vice president. Next slide, please. So today I'd like to speak a little bit about the Norwood waste disposal site. As you know, we've been working with the township over the last several years, both on this site as well as the Asphodel site, and supporting work with the municipal groundwater supply assessment. Next slide, please. I'm gonna do a bit of a recap on our last council meeting. Mike had presented at that point in June. However, before I get into the details on this, I just wanted to go over a concept that I think will be helpful for everybody as we work through these slides. I know we're gonna be talking about some technical aspects, so I'm gonna try and simplify it a bit for everyone. So our main concerns on the site are with respect to the impact of the buried waste, both on our surface water as well as groundwater features. So you can kind of imagine, I think Mike used this example last time, but picture a little glass container full of sand, and that's your waste disposal site. Now get a tea bag and kind of bury that in the sand a little bit, and the tea bag represents your buried waste on the landfill. Now, if you can imagine, I'm kind of picturing this here, as precipitation, surface water falls on top of that waste, it soaks into the ground and begins steeping that tea bag or leaching out that waste material. And you can kind of sort of imagine that flowing outwards on the site towards the site boundaries. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we work through this. It's sort of a simple concept for kind of the general things that we're going to be discussing today. As a follow-up or as a summary of our last meeting, we identified, or the MECP in 2021, which is the year prior to us taking on this file, identified two major concerns on the site from a compliance perspective. One was that the groundwater from the site, or that groundwater that's mixing with the leachate or contaminants, may be discharging to surface water in the mill pond and the Ouse River. That's number one. We currently have a work program for 2024 and 2025 to address this. And I should have made that little arrow orange, as I will be discussing a portion of that today. The second topic I'll be speaking about is the potential for an external source of contaminants to be impacting the surface water quality in the mill pond. So that would be something further upstream along the Ouse River or some other property that could potentially be impacting the surface water quality. In 2022, basically the year under which we took on this file, we found out, or Lindsay found out actually, the site had not been evaluated in accordance with its approved environmental monitoring program. We've since resolved that issue and moved forward accordingly. In 2023, we identified additional groundwater issues on the site. This is a line item about the reasonable use criteria, which is essentially a mechanism for which we evaluate acceptable limits of contaminants at the property boundary. So if we go above that, and we'll get into more detail this in a second, but that triggered the next stage of advanced monitoring, et cetera, moving forward. So Lynn's gonna be covering that portion, and I'll be covering the top two. The last is the ECA requirements. ECA is your environmental compliance approval, which is essentially a permission for a business or in this case, a corporation to operate operate a facility that's discharging contaminants into the environment. And that comes with safeguards for both public health and for the natural environment. So those sort of conditions within that ECA that you have to uphold. We're still working on implementing all of the conditions of the ECA, but we've done a number of them in 2024, and next year we'll be completing that as well. So we're moving towards compliance on that front. And the other outstanding requirement is the final closure of the landfill, which still remains outstanding. But today we're going to get an update on those two top items and the other red arrow regarding the reasonable use criteria. Next slide, please. So since our last council meeting, Township, Wills, and the MECP, or the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, met to discuss the compliance issues on the site. Following that meeting, we provided a detailed letter which looked over all the compliance issues known to date, where we're at with resolving those, and for those outstanding ones, we provide detail of our plans and schedules to move those items forward. We provide this in a letter September 3rd. However, I've not heard back yet, but we will be getting a response or expecting a response from them following the submission of a few technical memos that we're going to be reviewing today. Next slide, please. This slide probably looks familiar from our last meeting or council meeting. However, it's going over the tier contingency plans. This is how groundwater compliance on the site is monitored and managed. So tier 1 is our routine monitoring. So on this particular site, the Norwood Waste Disposal site, we go out there, we collect groundwater samples in the spring and the fall and do our analyses and prepare an annual monitoring report. If 3 parameters exceed the maximum concentration or allowable concentration during 3 events, we move into this tier 2 enhanced monitoring. Now, following our last council meeting, we indicated that we're moving to tier 2. We're going to have to go through that process to see, are the exceedances on the site due to the site, or can they be explained by other factors? Lindsay will get into more detail on this front. However, we did complete that program in the fall of 2024, this past fall. And we did confirm that we're now moving into tier 3, which is contingency measures, planning, and implementation. And this scope of work is determined through consultation both with the township, the MECP, and the township's consultant, which is currently Wills. And I'll let Lindsay hop on in here.
Well, I'll just provide sort of a little more detail with regards to the tier 2 program. So the tier 2 program is intended to evaluate groundwater quality, the property boundaries, down gradient of the site. So if you see here on this map, there were 2 locations that we were investigating, and they were TW10 up here and TW11. So the means by which you evaluate the water quality there is you determine background groundwater quality. So how clean the water is before it travels through the site. So up here at TW8, that location is where we collect the background groundwater quality. So we take the groundwater quality results obtained from the background, and we also evaluate based on the leachate groundwater wells. So the leachate groundwater wells are installed right in the buried waste. And they give us an idea of what the groundwater quality is right in that contained area. So the locations we used for this assessment were TW3 and TW4. So the RUC is a calculation where you take your background groundwater quality and your leachate groundwater quality, and you evaluate it based on what the groundwater quality is like at the property boundary. So we went out for 3 events in July, August, and September 2024, and we collected groundwater samples from those locations. And then we brought data back to our office, and we did some data analysis. And essentially, we determined that the groundwater quality at TW10 and TW11 is likely impaired by the leachate within the landfill. Oh, yes, like, perhaps the next one. This is the same picture. And next slide. So there were some specific parameters which are different elements that you'll find in the groundwater. We did identify that at TW11 seems to be slightly more impaired. As you can see on the slide, TW11 had various parameters: alkalinity, organic carbon, hardness, iron, manganese, TDS, barium, chloride, and sodium, that all exceeded the reasonable use criteria. TW10 had 3 parameters that exceeded. While we were doing our data analysis, we also conducted some groundwater flow. So determining what direction the water underground is traveling. And we only used the locations that were included in this enhanced monitoring program to look at, with these locations, what's the dominant direction the groundwater is flowing. And the groundwater, you see this blue arrow here, the groundwater is dominantly flowing to the southeast here, more towards TW11. So based on those results, we will now be moving into tier 3 of the enhanced monitoring program, which starts by discussions between township, the MECP, and the township's consultant to plan a path forwards to address these concerns. I think Leanne will be.
Oh, you guys.
Yes, so we have identified some data gaps as well that would provide a little more clarity and certainty with regards to which direction groundwater is flowing. And provide a little more clarity with the connection between surface water and groundwater. We have noticed some features within the monitoring network that might need to be addressed. There are some damaged wells up in this corner here. So TW5 and TW52 is also an RUC trigger location. So it's a location where we should be assessing compliance for groundwater. However, we're not able to collect groundwater samples from that location at this time. One of the wells is blocked and the other well is often dry. So there is a data gap up in this corner here as well. You can see the size of the site here. There are no monitor wells all through this area. So there's a pretty substantial gap there in terms of groundwater flow direction and groundwater quality in that area. And the final gap we're looking at is within this area here, to see where groundwater is going beyond TW11. So those are some pieces of this program that we'd like to investigate further. Next slide, please. So we have completed our tier 2 enhanced groundwater monitoring memo. So moving forward, that memo will need to be submitted to the MECP. And then we will begin discussions moving forward. And with that, over to Ian.
Seen that thing, I should check that out. So I'll be speaking about the two issues that were identified by the MECP in 2021. So you go to the next slide, sorry. This is the enhanced surface water monitoring program. So in 2021, the MECP said, hey, we've got these concerns about the groundwater and leachate from the site discharging the mill pond, as well as this external or potential offsite source of contaminants that may be impacting that water quality as well. But what did we do? We developed an enhanced surface water monitoring program, which involved sampling select locations on the site, both surface water locations, which are all these blue dots. You can't really see it, but I'll pick up in the next slide, as well as some monitor well locations for groundwater. We sampled those locations for 3 events in July, August, and September. In addition, we took a look at the western side of the site where the Ouse River transects this property. And the reason we're looking up there is there's known karst conditions. I'll get to what that is, but it's essentially dissolved limestone bedrock, kind of like the Warsaw Caves, where you lose the stream part of the year and it pops back up further downstream. And that plays a critical role in our understanding of physically what's going on the site. Then we summarize our findings in a memo, which I'll discuss the results of right now. Next slide, please. So again, here's the site. You probably can't see it on this plan, but along the northern margin of the mill pond, you see all these SW8, SW9, SW5. Those are all of our surface water stations. So it's just on the bank of the river. We scoop samples up there, from there. And then we included a few of the monitor wells, TW2, TW4. Those are all the little pink dots that are further inland. And back to Lindsay's point as well, we included some of our background stations here. So these should be representative of the natural quality of the groundwater, surface water, if the landfill wasn't there. So sort of our baseline conditions that we'll compare our results to. And that included SW1 way at the top, at a county road, as well as SW7, which was 2 locations on the Ouse River. We sampled 1 in July and 1 in August and September. But both of those areas have very comparable surface water quality, and we feel comfortable using that as background quality. We also looked at TW8, which is just to the northwest of the landfill footprint or the waste disposal footprint, which is this sort of little purple circle here. So that's where all the buried waste is. Next slide, please. So what do we find? In general, physically, we went and walked up the Ouse River on the west side of the site and confirmed where those karst locations are. So as I mentioned, karst happens when you have limestone rock It's exposed for, 10,000 years, 1,000 years, sometimes tens of thousands of years. And it's a very soluble rock. And as water works its way through that, it opens up fractures, it causes caves, it causes, fissures and, very great conduits for water to travel through. So as we were, maybe you could go back a slide, maybe we'll walking through right that way. What we found on site is that they're coming downstream from the Ouse River. Was that County Road 8? Time we were out there, so let's say July, September, and August, it was flowing quite nicely until you get to one of these surface water locations. At that point, the stream disappears. We call that a losing stream condition. You kind of lose the stream. It's gone underground. It's now become groundwater. As we continue walking further down the Ouse River, this is all dry riverbed at this time, until it pops back out at SW8 and SW9. So that those locations, right at the south end before it discharges back into the mill pond, the groundwater comes up the surface, and now all that flow is contributing, or basically the base flow conditions that are going into the mill pond. So that's contributing all the water into the mill pond that we can observe. I think that's all I have on that slide. If you can go 2 slides ahead. So what did we find from a surface water quality perspective is we collected these samples and we compared them to the provincial water quality objectives, which is the PWQO. And that's essentially a criteria that establishes the acceptability of surface water quality. So if you go above these limits that are provided, you're possibly impacting aquatic life and the natural ecosystem. One thing that was very interesting that we found is that for these background locations that are further upstream, you have very good groundwater quality. Everything's fine there. It disappears, and it's inferred that once it goes underground here, it's going beneath the site. That's really the only way or direction it can flow in. And it's popping up at SW8, SW9. The quality of surface water at those locations shows minor impairment. So it's been degraded at some point while it's been flowing underneath the site. And furthermore, once all that water discharges into the mill pond, we see an even greater amount of degradation at SW10, which is on the far east side of the mill pond. So some of the parameters that we saw that were elevated, and we used a metric that is, we considered parameters that are 25% higher than background as sort of moderately impaired. And we had parameter increases for chloride, nickel, cadmium, manganese, selenium, cobalt, phenols, aluminum, list goes on. And obviously those concentrations get worse the further you go throughout the mill pond. Next slide, please. You probably go 3 slides ahead because I'm just going to pull up an example you probably see better here. These results are fairly consistent across time to the 3 events, but I'm just going to highlight one so you can actually probably see what's going on here. It tells a bit of a story too, which is nice. So on the left-hand column here, we have all the parameters that we tested for. You got nitrates, lead, iron, chloride, chromium, this, that, the other thing. And then on the top here, we have all the surface water stations. So in this case, SW7 is at one location upgrading of the site in the Ouse River. You can see the surface water quality here. I guess you can't see it, but I'll let you know that it looks pretty good. The green highlighted cells indicate a parameter that was in excess or equal to or in excess of 25% higher than background. And the pink cells indicate a parameter that exceeded the PWQO. Now this kind of backs up my narrative that I was speaking to earlier, which is the water comes in to those karst conditions, goes underground, it's clean at that point. Now when it pops back up at SW9, this column's SW9, you see a lot of parameters that are about 25% higher than the background quality. As you move further downstream, so SW5, SW4, these monitor wells that are just along the edge of the mill pond, and SW10, which is the really nasty one, it's sort of lit up quite extensively. So we're seeing something else is happening in the mill pond to make it get worse from this one location, SW9, which is the only spot we saw coming out of the ground. So that leads us to believe that, one, when the water goes into the ground, into karst features, it's mixing with groundwater from the waste disposal site and the leachate. That's why it comes up moderately impaired in the mill pond. But to further on that, there's also another contributing factor to why it's so bad at SW10, which is on the very far side of the mill pond. So we think that's showing us that there's another area where groundwater from the site from the southern side of the site or the northern side of the mill pond is coming back up the surface in that location and further degrading the groundwater quality in the mill pond. Next slide, please. This basically sums up our findings. So one, since the ground or the surface water quality north of the site or upstream of the site was fairly clean, we weren't able to identify any potential offsite sources of contaminants during those 3 monitoring events. We did notice that the surface water quality is being impaired throughout the site once it goes underground and pops back up again on the western side of the site. So we think that's possibly to do with the leachate mixing with the groundwater while it's moving through the property. And then to reiterate again, we believe that the groundwater is discharging to surface water, the northern edge of the mill pond, where we've got really bad surface water sample results for SW10. The silver lining here is we do have one location, maybe I'll pick this up and point. SW3, which is our surface water station right at the outlet of the weir from Mill Pond, where the Ooze River flows out of the Mill Pond. That quality of the water there is actually quite good, which is strange, but I think what it's indicating is probably another source of groundwater input into the pond. It's clean water, so it's diluting that before it actually leaves and goes further downstream. But at the end of the day, the surface water quality in the Ooze Pond broadly around the site and in the Mill Pond is fairly poor, with elevated concentrations for leachate parameters. Next slide. Again, data gaps. What Lindsay mentioned before, you know that we've got missing areas on the west side of the site. Hey, that's got it. Sorry. We're telling a story here about what we've observed through the analytics and the physical things that we're able to see on site. And this is really based on some limited monitor wells on the eastern portion of the site, and then these select data points in the surface water quality. We don't have a great idea of what's broadly happening both on the north side of the site and the west side of the site with respect to how is that leachate actually coming out of that waste mound, that T, and how is it migrating, what directions they're going, how fast is it going, where are the concentrations of those parameters that we're trying to mitigate or lessen. So that's one thing. We don't have enough monitor wells on the site. We also don't quite know right now what the seasonal variability is for that surface water quality in the Mill Pond. In the springtime, you'd expect those flows to be pretty fast moving, a lot of snow melting. So we just don't have that data. Is that water quality better than what we observed? Is it different? That's one of the other data gaps that we have. Next slide, please. So next steps. We're recommending that we go back and complete additional surface water monitoring, particularly along the Ooze River and the spots we picked up along the Mill Pond in the spring. 2 parts here. One, to determine if there's any seasonal variability in that quality. Can that tell us something additional? As well, maybe at that point, we'll pick up an external source of contaminants, because at the time we did the investigation, it was pretty dry all over the place. We couldn't really identify properties contributing to that quality or not. Again, address the groundwater and surface water data gaps by adding more wells to the site beyond the approved new wells that we have. I think we've got 2 new ones going in 2025, but they're going down on the southern area of the site. We really are missing data across the western portion. And then we will continue with our approved work programs to further investigate this connection between groundwater and surface water. We've completed half that scope, and once we install these 2 new wells, we'll be following that up next year with some more sampling and provide a summary report in the fall of 2025 in the hopes that supplements the information we've been able to collect to date. Next slide, please. This is a broad summary of this presentation as far as the work to be completed moving forward. So one, I need to notify the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks within 30 days of the receipt of our enhanced groundwater monitoring memo. So this month, we should be reaching out and saying, hey, these are our results. Let's get together and talk about next steps moving forward. Which brings me to point 2, engage in a meeting with the township, MECP, and the township's consultant to determine if remedial or mitigation measures are required based on our tier 2 findings. And that falls within our approved scope of work, so we're okay to move ahead with that as soon as possible. Following this meeting, proceed with tier 2 or tier 3 monitoring, sorry, as required. We don't have approval for that yet. We don't quite know what the scope is going to be for the tier 3 monitoring and what exactly that's going to look like. Conduct additional surface water monitoring, as I just spoke to, in 2025 in the spring. We will require township approval to move ahead with that work. Address the groundwater and surface water data gaps by installing more monitor wells and increase our confidence in the conclusions and interpretations that we've made to date. And that we will need township approval for as well. And then under our approved scope of work, continue ahead with this groundwater surface water interaction assessment that we'll be carrying on with come early next year, early 2025 in the spring. That's all I have to speak to you today about. Do you have any questions? Or any clarification perhaps?
As much. Question for you, what's the depth of your sample wells in the pond?
In the pond, they are, so below, how much water is there? You're actually one installing them.
The groundwater wells,
Yeah, the middle pond ones.
the greatest depth is about below ground, about 10 feet below ground,
Below
below
that.
the water, yeah,
Below
so there's
the-
about 8
Like the
feet
base
of,
of the water, like the bottom
That's
of the
correct,
water,
yeah.
10 feet below that.
Then we have the deeper ones that are going to the sediment.
yeah. So they're 10 feet into the ground.
Into the
under
ground,
water.
okay, gotcha, yeah,
Yeah.
into the substrate, right. And those wells, we did screen, we have shallow ones that are, basically we collect groundwater samples from the muck layer, the
Right.
really loose mucky organic layer, and then in select locations, we also, put a neighboring well beside it, so we can sample beneath that, muck layer in the actual mineral soil or sediment at the bottom of the pond.
Right. And you said SW10 is really good,
It's really bad, sorry,
bad,
it's bad, yes.
that's the one that's going out of the pond?
No,
No, SW3 is the one that's going out of the pond, right by the weir, and SW10. Come on, pass that. Yeah, it's SW3 right by the weir,
And it's a good one.
that's a good one.
That's because the river runs from where you said it comes out down upstream. And it stays tight to that side.
Gotcha, yeah,
I've seen the pond drain many a times when I was a kid.
yeah, less
It's a main
mixing there,
stream.
yeah.
So you're getting the fresh water going. That's the current.
The thing to speak to on that front as well is, think here. So depending on the time of year, right? So when we were out here looking at the surface water quality, it was dry all along here.
Yes.
The only groundwater, only surface water going into the pond was from SW8 and SW9, which had a lot worse quality than
Okay.
SW3. So there's some other input here, we're not sure where, but that's, providing a fresher quality of water. To your point exactly, there's probably, we have this SW10 renewal embayment here, which will quieter water. And that quality is quite poor.
Any other questions, council? Deputy Mayor Burke.
Thank you, through the mayor. I was gonna say thank you for the presentation, but maybe not. But it is nice to see this process moving along. Now, you mentioned the data gaps, which is very obvious from looking at the maps. So obviously that's our next step, which you just stated, some more groundwater monitoring, some more wells. So in your opinion, if we were to close that data gap, how many more test wells would you need and how many more surface monitoring sites would you need in that area to complete that?
Right. I think from the surface water monitoring perspective, I think the network that we've established through this existing program is fairly good. So we're basically picking up, great water quality again, impaired water quality. There's nothing really in between there. As far as additional monitor wells, we do have the 2 ones that are approved, which are going kind of this general region here. It's on the sort of southeast side of the site. I would think, I have to pen to pad here, but if you had additional 3 or 4, would likely be, sufficient to speaking out loud here, thinking off the top of my head, but I think I'm gonna say 3 to 6, somewhere in that range,
In addition to the two
in
approved?
addition.
In addition.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing to note here, why I'm recommending that number is obviously we're on the Norwood estuary, right? That really linear land feature. And groundwater does have a tendency, although it can be impacted by other things, but it often does flow with the gradient of the land. So often you'll find your groundwater table is almost a subdued reflection of the topography at ground surface. So knowing that we've got grades, surface grades, dipping this way, down towards the highway, down towards the mill pond, even down towards the Ouse River, we believe the groundwater is likely flowing in multiple directions. So it's nice to have as many data points as you can, so you can look at each one and say, okay, in this little area of the site, how is the groundwater flowing here compared to, let's say, 50 meters, 100 meters over? We're really the more information, the better, but we could come up with a more detailed scope of work to address the outstanding items for it.
And just to follow, yeah, because from our perspective, from our, governance perspective, that's what we need to know when it comes to the dollars and cents, right? And then, can I just have one more
Yes.
follow-up? Just, you'd mentioned September, earlier in the report, September 3rd, a report was sent to the MECP and no reply. Is that a normal, like, we're almost looking at 4 months and we're talking about water quality. Is that a normal turnaround time or?
Fair enough, thank you, Mayor. During that meeting, so we did have a meeting on August 6th, I want to say, something around then. And I believe you actually reminded me of this, Lindsay, that they indicated that they wouldn't be responding to us until they get some data from us. So these 2 memos that we prepared, dated September 27th, I believe, once those are submitted to the ministry, I think they'll be comfortable at that point, looking over the information and responding to us. So, somewhat expected it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
My first question, Councilor Burke, just answered for me on the delayed response time. So that does make sense. And on those additional wells, not to put you on the spot, but where would you probably put those?
Through you, Mayor.
Your best guess at this time, best educated.
Fair enough. So I'll spin this a little bit. Sorry, you just leave me like use that. Right now, and I'm gonna broadly point the directions where I think groundwater is flowing. So we know it flows a bit in this direction to the northeast. We know it definitely goes to the east, into the southeast is quite a strong flow direction. We've got good indication that there's sometimes a southwest component to that. So I'm probably putting the well somewhere up the north side of the site. And then you almost want to put them in sort of triangle patterns, if you can picture that. So you want to position them, so you create a surface of what that groundwater surface looks like and you determine where the groundwater is flowing. So I do probably triangles like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that across the site. So they'd be fairly spread out so that we can speak to what's happening broadly across the whole site.
And just one additional question. If I can. On the last page, a summary of work to be completed. Bullet point number 3 is following the meeting, proceed with tier 3 monitoring as required. And then in brackets, tier 3 scope to be confirmed. Is that to be confirmed by the ministry?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry. So we will engage in a meeting with the ministry, township staff, and us to confirm what exactly that scope is going to look like. So at this point in time, I can say with any confidence what's going to be requested of us. So we will have to have a discussion with the ministry to firm up exactly their expectations and requirements moving forward.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Ian, can you just speak to TW8 here is a background well, right?
Right.
I didn't hear you speak to that.
I did leave that out. If I can pull up. Might get into the weeds on this one, but I'll try and keep it fairly high.
I think it's relevant to the work program.
The additional wells, for sure. So TW8 currently, you can help wherever you want, Lindsay, is being used as the background well for the groundwater monitoring on site. So it was positioned in an area right here, which was expected to be up gradient or uphill as far as the groundwater flows from the waste footprint. And that well is used to monitor compliance at the site. So we're saying, hey, this well should have great groundwater quality. That's how we're measuring the appropriate limits at the property boundary for the entire site. Now, when you compare when we look at the groundwater quality results from TWA, we measure it a different way in the situations. We're basically measuring groundwater in the same way that we measure surface water. So it's a different parameter suite. It's total metals versus dissolved metals. Typically, groundwater on landfill sites measures dissolved metals. But we said, hey, we're evaluating surface water in this case. We wanted to be looking at apples to apples. So all the groundwater samples that we collected, we measured the metals in that the same way as we do the surface water samples. When we did that, what you find is that the groundwater at TW8 is, greater than 25% higher in concentration for all these parameters compared to our surface water background, which is way further upgrading from the site. And a bunch of those parameters exceed the provincial water quality objectives for a number of different parameters. So what we suspect is, based on that groundwater flow that we think is kind of going all over the map on the site, we don't suspect that TW8 is actually an appropriate background water well.
Okay.
So, and that's the way the site's being evaluated. And if we did have a background water well that was truly appropriate and representative of the conditions, the story we're telling today might be a little bit worse as far as how do you describe that? Be further out of compliance with respect to groundwater quality. Yeah, it's the degradation would be greater.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, and thanks again for answering our questions. I was just wondering about the two wells that were damaged, the monitor wells. Is there any way that they could be fixed, or did we have to drill new wells, or like, I was just curious with those two locations because one was the bedrock monitor and the other one was dry. Can it be drilled further down?
We struggle.
We tried to repair the one. It's actually, there's Waterra that you use to sample the well. It's like a plastic tubing that goes inside the well and the groundwater pumps out of the well through the tubing. And at some point, prior to us, the tubing got pushed down the well pretty deep. So we've been trying to get it out of the well, but it's quite heavy and we haven't found means by which to remove the Waterra. In terms of re-drilling I don't think we could re-drill that well. That's dry.
So so I think that one location may possibly be able to be fixed, maybe bring a well contractor in and it's better equipment. What happens with this tubing is it gets down the well and it's full of water. So you're trying to get this little 2-inch diameter hole, hook something onto this pipe and pull it up, and it's over 100 pounds. So someone might be able to pull that out and retrieve it. We could look into that. And then the other location is a location that's always dry. So that location would be better off relocated somewhere else where we know we can get that sample out of it seasonal.
Okay, thank you.
For context, the well at your house
Yeah.
is 6 inches, right?
Mhm.
The well that we're looking at is this diameter. And the pipe, this smaller diameter tubing goes into that pipe in the ground, and that's slotted.
Okay,
And so we're able to collect the water sample out of the small diameter tubing inside there. So it's not within a 6. Otherwise, Lindsay would be able to reach down and pull it.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Hodge-Grease.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just, it was mentioned possible offsite sources. Do you suspect offsite sources? Or in one part of the report, it said you ruled them out, but then further on, like, do you think that there's another offsite source? Is that a suspicion, or do you just always rule it out?
We're looking at offsite sources. We could be looking at any sort of commercial property in the area.
Okay,
So there is a commercial property in the area that we're hoping to investigate. However, the surface water flows around there were dry. So we really had no indication of water coming off of the commercial site into the Ouse River and impairing that surface water quality. Other things we'll be looking at is, historic spills or incidents dating back to, way back in time. But the results from this program anyways, really do point towards the landfill, at least, speaking to this impairment. And there could be another source that might add to this as well, but, the conclusion is fairly clear with the information we've been able to collect so far.
and we can't blame it on the geese.
Can't, until this time, no,
There are.
we could try.
Unless they poop metal.
Yeah.
you have a further question?
I did, and it was about the offsite, so my question was answered. Thank you.
I just want to put a few things in context for you, if I may, Mayor.
Yes,
So what's it mean to you, right? Like, as you can tell, these are the technical experts, right? There was a time when I'm not anymore, now I'm the person who stands here in front of you and speaks to it. But what does it mean for you? Ultimately, so we have an approved work program right now that is in the budget, okay? And there's also a work program in there for 2025, which is approved as well. One of the first next steps that Ian and Lindsay had mentioned was a meeting with the Ministry of Environment. That's the first thing. I think let's not get ahead of ourselves in terms of drilling a bunch of extra wells until we, have the meeting with the ministry to, number one, identify that there is an issue here. We are into tier 3. We do need to do some additional monitoring, but let's clarify what that looks like before we start to move forward and make a recommendation to you in terms of that. In addition to that, I sort of think, you know, and this is no disrespect to the technical folks, but so what? So we go ahead and we collect a bunch of samples and we just confirm even more that the groundwater is impaired, right? At the end of the day, you still have to do something about it. You can't just let it continue to do that. So I tend to be a bit more pragmatic and say, how do we deal with the problem so that over time it gets better? I think that's where the dollars and cents can be spent or directed. And once we meet with the ministry, that's one of the things that we'll be discussing on your behalf. And then we'll be able to come back to council with a game plan to move forward. When Ian says, you know, let's drill some additional wells in 2025 as part of the existing approved work program, one of the benefits to doing that, in addition to having more data, is that you're mobilizing the drill rig once. So they're already there. So if we wanted to put in some additional wells, the challenge is that it's expensive, right? And so what we'd like to do is come back to you after we've had the meeting with the ministry. Obviously, Jeff and Alan would be there as well. And we'll come up with a game plan based on what their expectations are. One of the things that guides what we do is public health, because we work for you. And ultimately, you know, that's something that Ian as a professional is obligated to do, as well as we're obligated to provide you with the information so that you can make an informed decision. Okay, we're not at that point right now. We will be after we have the opportunity to meet with the ministry. Okay, is that a little bit more helpful?
yes.
Okay.
There,
Yeah, yeah. No, I have 100% faith in these folks knowing exactly from a technical perspective, what, you know, what's going on at the site. I just been doing this a little bit longer. I kind of understand your perspective as well.
Councilor Walsh?
And again, not to put you on the spot, but until you have the meeting, you have no idea.
Sure.
What do you think may come out of it?
Yeah, we've thought about this already. I mean, we've had conversations with Alan about it. It could be anything from, you know, properly close the landfill, which is part of the closure plan that has already been approved by the ministry, which essentially prevents precipitation from going through the garbage. So we mitigate as best we can the teabag effect. It doesn't address any groundwater that's flowing through the site horizontally. Okay, which is one of the reasons why Ian and Lindsay were talking about additional wells, because we've got a radial flow situation. So that's number one. Number two is, as I mentioned, I think I gave you actually cost estimates in the last presentation to remove the waste. Remove the solution to any contaminant problem is to remove it. If you're able to do it, but it's expensive. Like really expensive. Yeah.
Very costly.
So we're working hard on your behalf to try to, you know, protect public health at the same time and the natural environment at the same time as trying to balance dollars and cents for you. But I truly believe that in remediation by investigation is not the solution here. I'm going to say that again. Remediation by investigation isn't the solution. Like, i.e. continuing to monitor and drill more holes and things. I think your dollars are better spent elsewhere.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna end up in the
You
same
might need to
place.
spend those dollars.
Yeah, I think we'll end up in the same place at some point in the future.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Council, you've asked all your questions. Okay, may I get a motion to receive this presentation and update for information, and further that we direct staff to continue working with the consultant DM Wells to complete the scope of work. That was pretty much. Deputy Mayor Burt, Councillor Hodge Greaves, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll take a 1-minute recess here if we can, please. Moved by Councillor Walsh, second by Councillor Hodge Greaves, all in favor? Motion's carried. Council, can I have a motion to reconvene the meeting, please? Councillor War and Councillor Hodge Greaves, all in favor? Motion's carried, thanks. And finally, we have Joanna Barker of Baker and Tilly here to present the 2023 Consolidated Financial Statement Financial Audit. Go ahead, Joanna.
Thank you very much for having me. I also have John Hickey with me, who was manager on the job too, but I'm just trying to get his base around, so maybe we'll see him present next year. What you have before you is the presentation I'm gonna go through, but included in your package is also the financial statements and the post-audit letter. And the presentation summarizes that, but at the end of the presentation, if I haven't addressed something, questions from the other two documents that you have, I'm happy to address them. We start with the auditor's report. We've summarized here or put on the second paragraph of the auditor's report, which is the most important, and that's our opinion paragraph. And it says, in our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the township and the results of operations. So that's a clean auditor opinion. That's what you would expect to see. A couple things there to the word consolidated. These are the financial statements consolidated, the township operations, as well as the library and the cemeteries. And then they are in accordance with the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards, which you as a municipality have to follow. We're required to tell council what we do as part of our audit. So we review council minutes, open and closed sessions to make sure anything that's related financially is represented within your financial statements. We do lots of testing. We do random sampling. We do analytical review, and we look at management's estimates to make sure they're reasonable. We look at the various systems, the money coming in, the money coming out, and make sure that there's appropriate controls in place. And if we have any recommendations, then we'll bring them to council and or to management as well. The one thing I will note here, just before I forget, there was a restatement on your financial statements. You may have noticed that in the column, and I'll just give kind of the background before we kind of get into the slides. That related to some OCIF funding that should have been deferred in 2022 that was actually recognized. So the revenue was too high. It should have been deferred to be spent in 2023. So we've restated, once we found out that that information, we restated the 2022 as if that had happened. So if you were to take 2022 statements that I presented last year and compare them, then you'll notice that there's that difference. At the end of 2023, we're exactly where we should be. But it was that information. That information had already been communicated to OCIF, which was the necessity of having to make that restatement. They were told that it was restated. We didn't have that information, so, or that it had been deferred, I should say. So that's why the restatement happened. So just to let you know, I noted that there, so I didn't forget. It was $323,000. The audit is complete pending council's approval of the financial statements and then receipt of the signed representation letter from management and legal letter. So once we have all that, then we'll be able to issue the financial statements without the draft. There was no significant difficulties encountered during the course of the audit. No changes to our initial audit plan, no disagreements or difficulties with management. Obviously, we've had a full staff change, and it was a pleasure working with your new members of the team now. So we thank them for all their cooperation during the audit. And with all that said, there was also a new accounting policy this year that you saw within the financial statements. The biggest one that had the impact was the asset retirement obligation. So that was the obligation to record any kind of obligation or liability that you're going to have when you retire all your assets. So for example, your landfill sites, which, you've probably heard enough about today already, but, you do have that legal obligation to monitor them and close them appropriately, as well as included in this section is asbestos within your building. So there was a consultant required to look at that and determine which buildings had asbestos and then how much the estimate was to close them. So you do have 3 buildings, the largest one being the town hall with asbestos. So there's an estimate there now within your financial statements. There are 2 uncorrected audit differences too that we have to let council know about. Both of them are kind of trailing issues that ideally in 2024 will be cleared up. So there's a difference in your cash balance, in your reconciliation between the reconciliation and your general ledger, and the same with your HST. So the amounts are not significant enough to make us change our audit opinion, but we are required to let you know that, and I think the team will be looking at those in 2024 to get them cleared up. I think they've been trailing for a little while there, so just to let you know about those, and then they'll be ideally cleaned up and you won't hear about them again after today. Now we get into the actual numbers of the financial statements, and we've kind of broken down the segments. The first one being your financial assets, or the assets that you can either cash or the ones that can easily be converted into cash. So the first one being your cash and temporary investments of $2.5 million. Obviously, you can see the 5-year trend there, and it's lower than it's been. You've had a lot of capital over the last few years, so it will just make sense that you've been using the cash over the time. Your short-term investments are your GICs within the cemetery. They've been consistent. Your trade and other receivables, they've gone up with your ISIP funding for the water tower. It was owed to you at the end of December, as well as other funding and an increase in your HST rebate. You get a portion of your HST back, and with all the capital going on, then obviously that's going to be more of a rebate at the end of December. Your taxes receivable, they've gone up a little bit, something to watch, definitely. But the ministry looks at the total of your taxes receivable compared to your total assessment or your total billing for the year. In 2022, you were at 6.8%. In 2023, you're at 7.3%. The ministry likes to see anything below 10%. So you're at 7.3%. You're still definitely within that, but you want to make sure it doesn't get out. And then your assets held for resale, that's cemetery, the plots and the niches, as well as the community center inventory. The next slide just kind of shows that graphical representation, and you can see the green being your cash and the peaks in it as you use it, and then the trade and other receivables being the blue, and in the years of a lot of capital, you can see that has increased with capital funding. And then your financial liabilities, your accounts payable and accrued liabilities, that's the amounts that are, you were owing, as well as deposits. So big increase, or significant increase, $700,000 this year. 500,000 of that has to do with deposits related to development. So when the developers give you that, it sits as a payable amount owing for them to use, as well as an increase in your payables because of timing of capital projects. Your deferred revenue obligatory reserve funds, that's the amount you have remaining of your development charges, your Canada Community Building Fund, or previously known as gas tax, and some parkland. So you have about $300,000 in development charges at the end of 2023 to use in future periods. That's amounts you've collected. Gas tax remaining $197,000 and about $44,000 of parkland fees. Your deferred revenue other, so this is the funding, this is where you see the big difference if you looked at last year's statement. So in 2022, you're now at $343,000. It'd be $320,000 lower if you looked at last year's statement. So the restatement is in the 2022. But at the end of 2023, you have about $47,000 of OCIF funding left to spend, as well as in there is about $20,000 in cannabis funding that's going to sit there until we're all gone, I'm sure, unless you can find a way to spend it. I know we had a discussion about what you could spend that on. No change in your long-term debt, just paying it off with your principal payments of 1.2 million. And then the change here, there's nothing, with the new accounting policy, there's no landfill closure and post-closure liability anymore. That has been moved into asset retirement obligations. So 1.4 of that 1.7 relates to closing and monitoring of the landfill, as well as then the estimate of for the asbestos in the building. And then again, the graphical representation, you can see, the bigger blue, the accounts payable. In the time of doing a lot of capital, it would make sense at the end of December that you would owe funds. And then the new one this year, the 2023 being the purple one for the asset retirement operations. And then the net financial assets. So the financial assets minus your liabilities, no surprise here, but with the use of capital, your cash has gone down, or with the purchase capitals, your payables have gone up, and then as well as $700,000 of that decrease just has to do with the change in accounting policy. So if the accounting policy hadn't changed, you would have been in the plus, but looking at that. And then your non-financial assets. So these are assets that can't easily be converted into cash. The biggest one being your tangible capital assets, or the assets that you use to provide the services. And that's the historical cost of these assets minus the accumulated amortization or the expensing of those assets over their useful life. So you see an increase there with the additions of capital, $4.9 million, as well as when the asset retirement obligations get set up, they get added into your capital as well. So that was about $1.3 million there. And then amortization this year was $1.65 million. So you see an overall increase because you've added more in. We'll see the change of what that is on the next slide. So as I said, about $4.9 million in capital additions this year, 2.8 for water and sewer, which a good portion of that obviously is the water tower project. Other assets that you had additions, you had the All Wheels Park project, the fitness club, the medical center, and a loader backhoe as well. So lot of different additions this year, as you can see. And then we include this slide in the package because it's good to just look at an overall snapshot of your total asset additions over, we like 5-year period. You want to make sure you're replacing them at a greater rate than the depreciation or the amortization of those assets. The amortization is based on the historical cost of the assets where you're expensing them. And of course, if you were only replacing them at the same rate, you're going to quickly end up in that capital deficit, if you will, just because, of course, everything's costing a lot more. So you can see, the last 3 years, you've had a lot of capital additions. So you're no issues there. And then the accumulated surplus. So the accumulated surplus is your total assets minus your total liabilities. Comes out to that bottom number of almost $41 million, of which 37 million you've already used, you've already invested in capital assets. That 37 million is your net book value of your capital assets, minus the long-term debt associated with those assets. The asset retirement obligations get deducted off of that, as well as you've got about $750,000 unfunded for water systems. So that's capital you've purchased that you haven't actually funded with any revenue. So that $750,000 will have to come out of the water surpluses in the future. The township at the end of the day, at the end of December, had an accumulated deficit of just under $692,000. Which was basically an in-year deficit of the change in those two numbers. So an in-year deficit of $368,000. And then the cemetery sitting with an accumulated surplus of $104,000. And then the second portion is your reserves and your reserve funds. So you did use reserves and reserve funds, which is what they're there for. And you're sitting at about $4.2 million of total reserves and reserve funds using or decrease, if you will, of $787,000. I quite often get asked, is $4.2 million enough in reserves, right? You're in budget time, you're going to be looking at that. There's a number of ways to look at that. You need to look at your asset management plan. You need to look at what you're going to have to spend over the next little while. Make sure you've got the money on hand. We can't always rely on government grants. You've been fortunate in the past with some, but you want to make sure you have the funds. Another way to look at it too is, if you look at your total assets that you have on hand, the total historical cost of your assets, not your land or anything, is $65 million. So when you look at $4.2 million, obviously you're not gonna need to replace them all tomorrow. But it's just kind of one thing to look at. The historical cost of the assets are 65 million. So going forward, just something to look at. But I think that's really why the province is really pushing the asset management plan. You really need to make sure that you're planning for it and not just, you don't want those spikes because all of a sudden you realize you need to do something. Those things are always gonna come up, the unexpected, so you gotta plan for the stuff. And the next slide just looks at the change in the reserves and reserve funds over the years. And more being put specifically in other specified reserves and reserve funds, so specific purposes as opposed to the working in general funds. The next is just a summary of where your total revenues and total expenses were, and therefore the PSAP annual surplus of 2.6 million, giving you that ending accumulated surplus of just under $41 million. We'll see the breakdown on the next couple of slides, but this is just kind of the summary of where. And then again, just a summary, you can see in the years where you have a lot of capital and you've been able to get capital grants, your revenues are going to be higher than your expenses. And that's because you recognize all the capital grants in the year you get them, but then there's not the offsetting expense. That offsetting expense is over the useful life of the asset. So there's no kind of matching principle, if you will. And then we get into the revenue. So in total, your budget was about $10.2 million. The actual was about 9.98, if you will. So just under $10 million. The largest revenue being your property taxation at just over $4 million. Your user charges there, you'll see it was over 2022 balance, but under budget there. The budget did include a significant amount, $425,000 when I looked at it, for water and sewer hookups for development that just didn't happen in 2023. So that's the biggest reason why you see that decrease under budget. Your rec facilities, though, were over budget and over prior year. So kind of when you take those pluses and minuses, you kind of end up right there. Your Government of Canada funding, that was funding for the All Wheels Park and the water tower. And your provincial funding, that's your OMPF, which you get each year, as well as the OCIF that you use for roads and the water tower ISIP funding. So total provincial revenue of just over $2 million. Other significant amounts there, your investment income, as we're seeing everywhere, of course, up over budget as well as prior year because of the interest rates going up. Even with your decrease in cash balance, you still see an increase there, which is great. Your donations and other grants, about 195,000 of that 211 was donations you received for the medical center. And then your development charges earned and your parkland fees earned, that's the amount you actually spent during the year, the 53,000 that you used on development charges. There wasn't obviously the development plan as planned because their budget was 375,000. So, and then the parkland fees earned that was used on various parks and picnic shelters and that kind of thing. And then the revenue, property taxation being your largest, 40.7%, and user charges at 19.9%. So about just over 60% coming from user charges and property taxation, your ratepayers in the community. But a nice significant amount, 20% coming from the province, which I don't see in a lot of communities. Actually, usually it's 75% coming from the ratepayers between user fees and property taxation. So. And then your expenses, we're required to show expenses two ways. This is the first way, more by department. You budget about just under 7.7, came in about 7.3. I kind of did some analysis. There's kind of some puts and takes, nothing significant. In environmental services, it looks over budget, and that's really just because of the change in accounting policy. There wasn't actually any expenses. It was just where the expenses flow through for that change. Your health services obviously is increased because that's of course your medical center wages and the contract with the doctor, as well as my auditor joke that within health services, ironically, is a cemetery as well. So that's what makes up that category. And then recreation and cultural services was consistent. The rec user fees were up, and therefore it would make sense that your expenses in that area are up as well. And then looking at the kind of where your expenses are, largest as expected would be transportation at 31%. Your environmental services at 17.8%, and then protection 16.8%. And then your expenses the other way. All in all, when you kind of look at those numbers, they're very consistent, when you budget to actual. Some ups and downs within the category, but salary and benefits was very close. Interest charge was expected, so that should be pretty much bang on. The contracted services, there was differences with the medical center there, so that's why you see the increase there. And then the amortization has gone up, but that's with the impact of the asset retirement obligation change there as well. The one thing I will note, if you were to audit my work, you will find an error. The 2023 column doesn't add, the contracted services should actually be 51,000, or sorry, the other line, I should say, sorry, instead of 158,000, it should be 51,000. It is correct within the financial statements. There was just something wrong with our presentation template here, so I apologize for that. And that all had to do again with the landfill accretion, which had to do with the accounting policy change. So. And then just looking at where you're spending your money, 36% as expected would be salaries and benefits, and then materials and contracted services. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Joanna. Go ahead.
Question, Mayor, for you. When we look at revenue from taxation, that is net of what we're sending to.
Through unit, there.
Yes.
Yeah, that is just what you get to keep. Yes.
Councillor Hodge-Greaves.
So with that, then the tax is receivable, but that's the total taxes receivable, including what we're collecting on behalf of the protection services on this report.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yes, that's the downside, is that you have to pay the county and the schools on their quarterly payments. And that's why you get all the penalty and interest. I guess that's supposed to be your cost of doing the work of collecting it. But yes, the tax receivable is the full amount that is owed. And at that point, you do get to keep it all because you've already paid for it. Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? All right, council, I'll state the recommended motion that the council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood approves the 2023 consolidated financial statements of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood as presented, and further that the council authorizes the mayor and treasurer to sign management report for the year ended December 31st, 2023. Moved by Councillor Walsh, second by Councillor Ward. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving along to staff reports, we move along to R2, 5-year resurface treatment plan. Jeff, go ahead, please.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll try to get to this without a coughing fit here. I'm fighting something off, but it's that's some tough acts to follow. Hopefully I can afford to do this. It's anyways, I really enjoy doing these 5-year plans. I was hoping to get farther with them this year just to get an update on them. I think what sparked it was because this year with just all the changes and shoving this year's projects into next year, and maybe just a difference in flavor, a different style maybe. I think it was time to maybe update it. The previous plan was pretty much based on the roads needs study completed by the consultants every 5 years. That was the driving force for it. I think my style, it is important to have a flavor of your operations and the people that are here every day and live and breathe the roads. I think it's important to include that as well. Not taking away from the consultant's recommendations, but like I said, we are here every day. And I think just to follow up with Councillor Ward from about a month ago, when you had said we were on the same page with looking at some of the hills and doing that. So the report was really light with the lead. I thought we would just jump right into the plan itself. I think when we first started doing these 5-year plans, the big focus was kind of fixing what we have now and you know, not starting from scratch, not adding a whole lot of new stuff, but just repairing what we have now. This plan is unique because we're in a stage where, you know, what we have is currently in pretty relatively decent shape. So we can just maintain it and we can have an opportunity to maybe add some new surfaces as well. The surfaces, yesterday was a prime example of, the surface treated roads and then how they react with the ice that we get now compared to the gravel. You know, it's certainly nice to see those surface treatments not freezing up as bad as the gravel. So it's a big benefit for us operationally, not only for the traveling public, but just for, to keep everybody safe and the materials work so much better on them. And I wanted to give Mel a shout out. When I handed this in, it was a pretty basic Word document with some bold and some underlines, and I get this masterpiece back. So it's, it's certainly impressive. So yeah, of course, jumping right to 2025, which was basically 2024 pushed ahead. We'll see the Asphodel 8th line up first from just past Stewart's to center line. There is a bit more earthworks on, we didn't get there this year and I think we can do better yet. So there will be some earthworks to complete on there. And I think there's one more culvert that we'd like to adjust as well. So that will happen next year. I don't think it was included in the previous plan. The pulverizing really jumps up the costs. It's $2 a square meter to have the pulverizer. And so there is a section of the 8th line that is existing surface treatment from just past Nap up to the bridge. So the pulverizer is here for the 7th line anyways, so we would just move it over there and pulverize. It's just a nicer job than ripping it with the grader, and it's not chunky, and it's just easier to handle. The pulverizer puts it right back to gravel pretty much. And then again, moving over to the 7th line from Sand Road to center line, there's a significant excavation to complete. That's kind of why I backed away from it, just starting here in July. From center line, probably north 200 meters, it's a terrible soft spot. Everybody that's lived here probably remembers for years that it was never treated. And then we did treat it, and it shows signs that something's going on underneath there. So it's time for a full excavation. So before we treat it, again, we'd like to dig that out, replace it with some geotechnical cloths and maybe a sub drain and some decent aggregate. There must be a spring in there or something. So like I said, that'll take us some time to complete that. I know there's been a lot of comments with the trees on the 7th line and through there. And like I said, I kind of picked my battles on that one. What you might see after a couple of years on the 7th line, the county is doing it now and they're having great success with it, is they actually put a micro on top of the surface treatment. So it'll be a harder surface through that shaded area and it'll be nice and it'll look like a black paved surface. And I think that'll help in that area. The trees aren't ideal, but for that stretch, I do get the aesthetics of the road. And like I said, sometimes you pick your battles. That surface treatment was done in 2011 though. And so that is a pretty remarkable run for surface treatment on a road that busy. So like I said, I think maybe I didn't include it in the plan. We'll just see how it behaves, but I think that's maybe going forward. We would look at trying to maybe put a micro through that section. I think it would help protect that surface even more. And again, the pulverizer, it wasn't really included that I picked up in the last plan, and it does add a significant cost. You're looking for that stretch probably 45,000 to have the road pulverized, but it's by far the best way to deal with the existing surface. So. And then jump in anytime, year by year, if you'd like to. Yeah, go ahead.
One quick question for you. As you know, there's a business on that road.
Yep.
What kind of, like, will the whole road be shut down? Obviously, we need to work on the road, but I also, we have a business down there that. Sorry, two businesses, yes. That summers are busy.
Yeah.
So how will that kind of work? How do you see that?
Through Mayor, for the most part of it, it'll be maybe one lane restriction for the most part of the summer. I probably would close the other end of it for when we do the full excavation. It's just easier to have an excavation that depth and try to keep the lane open on a narrow situation isn't ideal. So we would probably close the south end and detour around, but I don't think that would impact the businesses as much, and that you can still get to them from Highway 7. So, but there will be impacts, but we'll keep it to a minimum, that's for sure.
Sorry,
Through you, Mayor, the pulverizing, is that then reused?
Yep.
In the same setting? So it's the one that chunks it up and spits it out the back?
No, through your Mayor, it's just it's like a big tiller.
Oh,
It just
okay.
chews down about 8 inches and stirs it all up. It breaks down everything. So the key to a good pulverizer operator is keep the machine going slow and the tiller going fast. They will come in, if you don't catch them in time, they just want to get in and get out because it's a square meter price. So you just need to catch them, and it will be just like a gravel. And then once it's pulverized, the grader will shape it up and compact it, and then we'll add 3 to 4 inches, probably of aggregate as well. On top of that, just to, the pulverizing, it's not perfect, it is like a gravel, but you do end up with the odd chunk still, so the gravel's just to seal it and cap the pulverizings. 2026. All right, the Asphodel third line, center line to County Road 2. So yeah, we're jumping back into kind of protecting what we, our current assets. The third line from center line to County Road 2, as my understanding, it used to be a county road. I think that's an asphalt surface. Currently, and it's had a good run. It was in the past surface treatment plan for a maintenance layer. But my feeling is it's currently already beyond a maintenance layer. There's a lot of cracking and a lot of deformation, and I think it's if we can get one more year of the surface, which shouldn't be a problem because it is an old asphalt surface. I think it's time for a redo, and it will be a nice complement in that area because all the roads are in relatively decent shape. And then just logistically as well, the third line into the heights as well as Asphodel Heights. Currently, they're in relatively good shape, and we're hoping they can make another couple of years and stay there, and then we would cap those with another maintenance layer. As well, I think the Heights, the Heights has had a maintenance layer probably, I would say, 5 to 6 years ago, so it's coming due for another one to protect that asset. It's definitely more economical than a complete redo. If we can catch it in time and cap it, so. Again, with these plans, they are a living document. If something goes completely south, they're reviewed year by year and altered. And again, this is just a draft. If I'm missing something or you want to rejig roads, it's a great opportunity to talk about that. But that whole area, it will be a nice compliment to clean up everything where they're in, again, protect the assets. And again, I'll point to the pulverizer. When you involve that, you're adding a significant cost. I did incorporate a 2% cost per year just to try to catch any increases. 2 years ago, everything doubled, so you try to do your best, but anyways, and again, I'm happy. Any questions on 2026?
Deputy Mayor Burt?
Thank you, Mayor. Just on the Asphodel third line to County Road 2, replace all center line culverts, is that?
Just that crossing.
Just that crossing, okay, thank you.
I think just while we're doing it, it's a good time while it's ripped up and.
Okay.
Exactly. Councillor Ward?
Yes, thank you through you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I'm gonna leave back to 25 if you don't mind,
Yep.
and that's on the 8th concession.
Great.
And so that road's used quite a bit. There was an accident in 7, like people kind of detour up 8 and then down center. So what is the surface type that you're putting on? Is it still gravel or is it like is it a harder surface than that?
You'd be tar and chips, more or
Is it
less
tar
tar
chip?
chips,
Okay,
yeah,
that's
surface
what
treated
it-
tar chips,
yeah.
yeah, it's
Okay.
the double layer of, so it's actually the
5/8 and
yeah,
3/8?
the 2 layers.
So the same as on the
about an
third
inch.
line, like kind of the same, similar? Okay,
Exactly, yep,
perfect.
same thing, yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify,
Yep,
thanks.
it is tried, tested and true, and it is still the most economical surface out there. I think it's a great opportunity to talk about, the thin lift on center line. The first project, that was completed with, it was in North Kawartha 6 years ago. And, of course, my experience, I spent 3 years there. It's not lasting. It's cracking a lot and it's flying apart. We did a council road tour last year and I was able to take them out and show them, I said that, I think my feeling on that was just pump the brakes because it is new and, just let it live for a little while and let's see how it behaves. So we took a focus back to surface treatment because it is a tried, tested and true product as long as your contractor is reputable. So anyways, we hope that they've got the bugs out of the batches on center line that they've used and like I said, surface treatment is it is still the most economical.
2027?
2027 is actually my favorite year. It's, I think, I can hardly wait to get there.
I see more kilometers done too, Jeff.
Yeah,
That's a
no,
good
it's,
thing.
no, center line, the east end of center line has always been a thorn. Those hills, we spend probably the majority of our time over there after heavy rains, all the time. So, again, it's always nice to add a new asset. And, especially when it's gonna have the impact of that well over there, to be able to spend some time over there with the ditching and the regrading and then complement it with the surface treatment. And again, like yesterday, it's a white knuckle ride. Even this morning when it was froze up, that's our representative around there for the road patrol. So this morning it was like a bottle again. So it's always exciting, but it'll be nice to, I said, it'll be a nice compliment to seal those up, that's for sure. And I do reference the geosynthetic, different places where we know there's soft spots. That's the tarp that you'll see, the black tarp that's laid down. It works excellent for giving the tensile strength to those roads. It lets the water go through, but doesn't let the mud and stuff come up through into your aggregates. So, and then again, with the maintenance layer, trying to protect some of the assets, Highway 7, the fifth line from Highway 7 to the boundary. Again, it's still in really good shape, so hopefully in 2027, it maintains that and we can cap it and preserve it again. And it would be nice to see those prices come down. I was thinking after the big spike a couple of years ago, but they haven't budged, so. Anyways, again, yeah, I'm happy to, before we move on. All right, 2028, so when my last 5-year plan that I had done here for the surface treatment, it was a pretty much a tie between the 8th line that we're completing next year and the 7th line north of the highway. It came down to traffic. The 8th line did see a bit more traffic on than the 7th line. But I think it's time to revisit that. Those concessions are becoming a bypass for town as everything gets busier, and we see the impacts on the 7th line throughout the summer. It's it's a relatively flat road, but it still takes a lot of abuse from bypassing the lights and the busy traffic. So I think again, that'll be a nice compliment, and it's a new asset. And then swinging over to some maintenance layers, again, Trentview Estates, the 3 streets, Park Lane, Heather Glen and Pine Ridge are still in great shape over there. And the Asphodel-6 line north of the highway as well, we capped the hill. And the theory at that point was to tie into an intersection and not just do the hill. So that's why the kilometer stretches, we tied in at the highway. And then we did the section and we caught the hill. That was the theory, to seal those up. Again, as we get closer to 2028, maybe there might be some consideration of completing the 6th line as a whole and just to fill it in all the way to the boundary. Again, depends on prices and what else we have on our plate at that time. But for the time being, I just left it as a maintenance there to cap what we have and protect it. And again, yeah, like I said, the 7th line will be another one that we take a few bullets over throughout the year, that's for sure. So. I guess I forgot there's a page and the same thing with the Asphodel 4th line, just logistically while we're doing that, the 6th and the 4th are actually the same age and it's that kilometer stretch. And we seal the hill on the 4th north of the highway. So again, in 2028 to catch it as well. And while we're there, it just makes sense. Kind of to wrap up the 2029, the last year of our plan. Focusing again to the Asphodel 2nd line, I think it's had a couple maintenance layers on it. It is starting to show signs of, it will be getting beyond a maintenance layer again. So I think the next round for it would probably be a total redo. It's got some culvert issues on it and whatnot, so it is time. So, hopefully we can get the longevity of it until 2029 and let that surface kind of live the last of its life. And then go with a total redo on that one as well. And again, yeah, with the maintenance layers, looking at the Asphodel 10th line, south of center line, that was another hill that we capped for a kilometer stretch. And then to bring Birdsall's into the mix, again, it's in excellent condition still. And hopefully at that time, we're able to just cap it as well and protect it and get another 5 to 7 years out of it. It's of course with the trailer park, it's a busy one as well, so.
Right.
So we, but like I said, it's held up well since we redid it, so. And just to close it out, that's the summary of everything, just for a snapshot of what we're looking at for, financial obligations as well as what we're trying to accomplish with the kilometers. With both maintaining and adding, and I'm fully open for questions or suggestions.
Deputy Mayor Burt.
Thank you. Just on your, last year, 2029, the Birds All Line, is there any cost sharing with that section of the road with OSM or no?
I'd have to look at the agreement through you, Mayor. I'd have to look at the agreement, for a capital. I'm pretty sure there is for a cap, there's a dollar figure for capital, but they do define maintenance as
Okay.
ours, so.
Oh,
But
okay,
at that point, I know there was cost sharing when we rebuilt it,
okay, I was just wondering
before,
about that.
but,
Okay,
yeah, I never took that into consideration, so, that's a great point. That would cut that cost in half
Okay.
if there is cost sharing, so. And again, I think with the costing, you know, when I do these, I try to get a consistent number, so you don't get those big spikes and up and down, so, you know, it's kind of the 400,000 to 450,000 is kind of a consistent budget number every year, and they're a great tool, just, you know, when you get all your plans in place, when it's comes time for the budget, you just open all your plans and refresh your pricing, and,
I like that figure, how you put that in there all the way, that it's very consistent. Just a question, it's not to do specifically, but it is to do with the roads. What do you spend on calcium a year, Jeff?
I think it's around 80,000, I think is in our.
So over 500,000. I like the idea I was talking to you about before, getting the county to go together on a machine. Same way as Trent Hills does. If you drive any of the roads south of here, yeah, south of Hastings, Warkworth, all their back roads are all tarred and checked. They're beautiful. They own the machine. I asked Jeff, what's it cost? He says $1 million. I said, there's 8 municipalities in the county. Why wouldn't they go together on this? You're gonna get more roads done every year. You have to supply your own dump trucks, yes, but the biggest cost there would be the tar itself then afterwards, right?
Mostly, yes, through you, Mary. Yeah, Northumberland County has their own tar and chip crew, and all of the Northumberland townships make use of that system, so, you know, and yeah, it has worked very well for
You
years.
get a lot more roads done on that. Go ahead.
just speaking of that, do you, Jeff, happen to know, like, the savings overall, like over a 10-year period, say what that would be taking in the cost and the amortization cost of the machine to do it?
Right.
That would be interesting to
That would
see
be
that,
looked
not
at.
that it's your job or
No.
your job, that would be the county job.
That's the
to see
county
who to
level
buy it.
and that.
But it's interesting,
Oh.
it's an interesting.
I just
thing to
hate
think
whenever
about.
you go south and you say you wanna go to Belleville and you can take any side road down there south of Hastings or Warkworth and they're all hard and quick, they're beautiful roads.
Yeah, it is, through Mary, it is unfortunate with the price increase, 2 years ago, you know, a double surface treatment used to be $30,000 a kilometer, and now they're 60, like it literally doubled.
Crazy.
And, yeah, it is crazy, and like, so we're hoping they came down, but we're not seeing any decreases.
Any further questions of Jeff? All right, thank you. I'll read the recommended motion of the council of the township of Asphodel-Norwood, accept this report for information and further that the council approves the recommendations outlined in this report. Movers, Councillor Hodge Creed, seconder, Councillor Walsh. All in favor? Motion's carried. Moving along to R3, Jordan. You have the floor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. R3 is a report on boards and committees reserves. So for a while now, a few council members have asked for updates on committee reserves. We thank you for your patience. We have confirmed the numbers and come up with recommendations for committee reserves in future years. So the balances of each of the 3 committees that we currently have are listed in the report: the Cultural and Heritage Committee, Special Events Committee, and the Business Advisory Committee. To note, the Special Events Committee total does include, before my time, the Beautification Committee, EdBack, Special Projects, as well as Showcase Asphodel-Norwood. So that has all been lumped into that sum. Staff are recommending the following process for boards and committee reserves in 2025 and future years. A lot of this comes from the healthy balances we currently have in these reserve funds. So the first is that boards and committees must budget for reserve transfers. So I know there was some discussion and information relayed to me that any unused funds in previous years that were part of the committee budget would automatically roll forward into the committee reserve. Given the healthy balance of the reserves, we want to, I want to say eliminate that process, but we're asking that any money that you would like to go to reserves be budgeted for in that year upfront. If it's not budgeted, if there is money left over and you need it for a specific project, you would need to request that through the CAO.
Right.
A second one, request must be made to the CEO, deputy clerk, deputy treasurer to move the unused budgeted amount to a reserve line. If a request isn't made, the unused budget amounts will not automatically move to a reserve line. The third is that we will cap the total reserve balance for each committee at $10,000. Current board and committee reserve balances exceeding $10,000 will be honored. Requests must be made to the CEO to increase the board committee reserve capped amount. So as an example, if any of these committees drop below the $10,000 reserve amount, you can make it back up to that amount, but a request must be made to exceed in the case that you do have a specific project that you want to use the funds for. And if you have any questions? Deputy Member.
Thank you through you, Mayor. I like the recommendation for the reserves. I think that's smart. That's great moving forward. So my question is, you rolled all that into one for the special events committee. Should we be looking at splitting that up a little bit and putting some into the business advisory committee? Because there was some there was a big business component in the previous iterations of that committee. And I'm just wondering, to do some economic development work or some CIP or something like that. So I'm just wondering if some of that should be moved around, but I don't know the process of how you do that, what the policy is in place. That was my thought when I first saw these numbers.
Through you, Mayor, the reason that it was bundled together is that's how it was tracked by the previous treasurer. I'm open, I know discussions with Alan, we are open to funds potentially moving. There is some difficulty. I can break it out from the previous tracker for Showcase Asphodel-Norwood for amounts. Trying to get the information for beautification and back at special projects. The information here goes all the way back to 2008, 2009.
Okay.
That might be difficult for me. I can run the reports, I can try to see, but the accuracy of them might not be great, but definitely open if council thinks that.
Just a thought, unless the special events committee is gonna do some like big bang up concert to fund the medical center.
You heard.
I don't know.
Councillor Hodgkins.
Yeah, because I was noticing that's a huge balance. I'm wondering if some of the long-term members, like, was the money saved? Does somebody know what that money was originally saved for? Was there some big plan? I assume, yeah.
Go ahead, Al.
I've been attending the meetings for both special events and business advisory throughout the year. I won't say been to all of them, but I've been to a majority of them. I am not left with the impression that there was any one specific thing that either one of them were necessarily working towards. What you might want to consider, and we talked about it here when we give the option, but saying capping them at 10, you could pretty much cap them both at their 10 now, have that available to them. And then they could be thinking about what they wanted to do going into 25 or 26 or anything like that. But having been to a lot of those meetings, I'm not aware of anything.
Councillor Welsh.
I'll just, again, I can only speak for the last 4 years because I've sat on special events. And I mentioned this in the comment down was, I don't think they're aware that they have that kind of reserve money sitting there. Honestly,
I would, through you, Mayor, I would.
honestly, I know they've asked different times of the year, and I came to Jordan over here, and we kind of had to wait for the audit. But I really truthfully they'll be shocked when they find out that they actually had that much money sitting.
Okay, so there
And,
wasn't
and,
some
and then
secret.
realistically, don't think they need that much money
No.
sitting there either, so.
Not at all.
Unless you have I look through your committee, all of the help, you have a specific project you've been working on for a couple of years to digitalize things, so makes absolute sense.
And happening this
Last
year.
special events committee meeting, we're looking at a couple of projects, but they're not even cost to that to the point yet, so. No, they would be surprised, so. I like the policy that we're putting in place.
Yes, I do too. Deputy Mayor.
I guess just to follow that up, so we've got those numbers, should we be putting that out to those two committees? Sorry, the one committee, special events committee? As far as that $24,000 goes to see, like, I guess I'm just wondering what next steps are. Culture and heritage, they'll be using that money, we know what they're going to use that for.
Councillor Walsh, you were on that committee and so was I. They're not gonna know there was that much money in
No,
reserves.
absolutely not.
I think that you can move that down now to that end.
I would be uncomfortable doing that
Would
without their
you?
knowledge, yes. I mean, it's,
I think the figure that they thought and we thought that we had there was around $3,800.
but that's not what it is, so.
No,
To me, I think they should be made, personally, I think they should be made aware of it, and it's most of the same committee members. And to advise them of it and suggest the transfer, because it's gonna be capped anyway, but I would be uncomfortable just transferring at this stage.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you through you, Mayor. As to what you're addressing, I think that all of the committees that are involved in this need to know that where that reserve line initially came from, because it was a joint committee. And the special events was only formed a couple of years ago. It wasn't I think that money was only separated 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When we
Right.
formed this. So 2 years ago, I think that money wasn't allocated in the right spots. You know what I mean? Because the BAC started 6 months later than the other committees. And so I think that money was put into a reserve line and it wasn't allocated properly of what was really reflective of those joint committees.
Go ahead, Alan.
Through you, Mayor. Just the one piece I would kind of put out there for some thought, for some consideration, and a lot of this happened before the current treasurer and myself got here. But this is all taxpayer money.
Yeah.
That was previously assigned to these committees. All you're really saying is if you're capping it at the $10,000, here is your level playing field going forward. So I don't really think you're taking anything away, and you're just putting it back where it came from.
Deputy Mayor Burt.
And on that note, like special events committee, the showcases rolled into that, and really showcases a business piece in my mind. Even though that was the group that did it, so that's why I'm thinking that showcase piece, whatever amount that amounted to, and I think at the time, there you might remember, like, a lot of times you take in $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so yeah, I, to have $24,000 sitting in the special events committee, don't think it's necessary. I do think it, the members need to know, but I think that needs to come back. Like you say, it's taxpayers' money. It's not gonna be used. I don't think so. So I think there's just that clarification piece between those two committees and,
So then the motion that we have here, I do not think that we should move forward with it until these committees are talked to, and that'll be in January. All right. Can I have a motion relating to that? Until the committees see their actual figures. Well,
Through you, Mayor, the only recommendation I might make on that is with the $10,000 that you're recommending, you could have had some verbiage around going forward as of 2025. This is it. So at some point, if we end up leaving it there and they spend it, they need to know that they wouldn't go past the 10 again. That might be something to consider for now.
all
Yeah,
right.
I think with the special events, the only group in there that I know could, one of our members, who was with the beautification committee, always wondered that they had a reserve with the beautification committee, was always wanting to know what that amount was, that it didn't kind of get lost in the big shuffle of things. But I would never have thought that would have been even 10,000 combined with everything, so.
And when you have reserves, it should be for a specific thing, as we've said going forward. Just to have reserves is not a reason to.
Because I look at especially that's showcases one of the events that that group runs, and it actually self-funds and actually generates sometimes a bit of a problem.
Now, looking forward, I look at the business advisory committee, I could see, of course, they want to do, what's the proper name of it?
Community market.
Yeah, I can see a permanent building set out there, and I'm not talking a great extravagant building, but just a roof on a building that people can go under with their 10 by 10 structures in case there is a heavier rain at the time or anything like that, people going to the place. But it's got 2,500, so I'm not recommending anything with it.
I guess I just feel that sometimes the committees have, you know, things get ground down through certain kinds of processes or people have left or what, if someone feels that there used to be a bunch of money in the beautification thing, then it used to be quite a lot and their feeling was right. So then I also feel that it's about honoring what the intention of the money was. It
Right.
might have been
Exactly.
something, and maybe it's something that, you know, I just feel before we take it out of the committee, that line, just ask and investigate what was the money intended for? And because if it ended up in there somehow, or maybe the committee doesn't get funding for the next few years to bring the reserve down because it's $5,000 budget line. So maybe that's what the special events committee could look at as well. Those are just some thoughts, but yeah.
Okay, can we have a motion then that we accept this report for information? And further that we'll be going back to these committees in January to inform them what's in their reserves then. And then we'll have to move step forward after and tell them all those committees that it is $10,000 is all you're gonna have in that reserve unless it's earmarked for a specific thing. Alan?
If that's the structure you want, you need to pass a resolution saying that's the structure that you want. Talk about a few different things here.
Yeah,
And I understand the direction to go back and talk to them, and that's what we'll do. But I can't tell them these are gonna be the new rules until you make the new rules.
So, but the motion as it states is that we're receiving this information for information. And that then we are going to then recognize these as their amounts, but moving forward, it's $10,000. That is the existing motion.
Okay.
So is that not,
That gives me the new rules, yes.
that is what this motion is, correct?
Yes.
And
But
then,
that's leaving it at the 24K.
yeah,
and the 19.
Sorry, through you, Mayor.
Yes.
I would like perhaps a little bit more investigation into the funding that was in the ed back prior to the separation, because special events was only formed 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if perhaps we send it back to staff and ask for more investigation before it's sent before the thing, because I just don't think it's quite broken
It's
down quite properly. I don't know how anybody else feels at this table.
I agree with you. Deputy Mayor Bird.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Ward, because there will be a big chunk of that special events committee that was ed back, which had the business advisory committee as part of that, economic development beautification. I forget the acronym now. It's gone through many variations, but whatever the acronym is. And obviously, Jordan, you know, you're gonna have to muddle through the mud maybe a little bit, and
A lot.
well, don't,
Yeah.
I guess, maybe don't spend a ton of time on it,
No.
but see, I don't know what those
line to look like what those books look like. But I'm just thinking that, maybe there's a little bit of tweaking with those numbers. And then a little bit better picture on that business end of the special events committee prior to being the special events committee, I guess is my thinking.
Through you, Mayor, I'm happy to look into it. Like I said, the tracker I've got now is one line. Some
Right.
years are missing. It goes back to 2008. If in the GL, the general ledger, if it's all under one account number, like for committees or certain projects, beautification, head back, it's gonna be up to me to decide what I think
Right.
it's falls under which category. Happy to do it, happy to summarize it and look into it. Like I said, I can, the showcase Asphodel-Norwood is broken out right away. That's not a problem. It'll be the beautification, the head back, and what I guess was once special projects, which be a little more difficult to look into. Our current system, I don't know how far back it goes. I've never gone back past it in 2017 in our Keystone system.
Right.
So again, happy to look into it. Won't be tonight.
No,
It'll take a little bit of time, but yeah, we can attempt it.
Councillor Hodgkrees.
Would there be information in the meeting minutes of, my concern is that whatever the money was held for EdVac and, you know, the beautification, what was it intended for? What,
Oh, I know.
and so is that in the meeting minutes of those previous committees? And I just feel sometimes things get shuffled and lost, and the ideas and the visions that people pour their heart into, and then they don't get realized because of stuff that changes. I just don't, I mean, if there's a chance that we could actually fund something that somebody in the township thinks is supposed to be being funded, because I come up with that, well, this was supposed to have been done. Maybe we should just look for the supposed to have been, I guess that's my concern. I don't want to take the money away without investigating that we're not taking it away from something that was supposed to have been done, because that sometimes is what you come up against.
Deputy Mayor Burton.
So just for a bit of background with the, with the previous EdVac committee, I think you can on that with me. They were looking at, signage uptown, but some of that was fixing up the exterior of private buildings, putting, you know, township murals on. That was one thing. Another thing was putting like a welcome sign at the Four Corners, kind of on the food land, like what the property that the township owns. That was another thing. The other sign that you talked about, that doesn't look very good, that was another thing. So those were the most recent from, we were elected 2018 to 2022. So those were the things that were talked about then. Before 2018, I have no idea. I think a lot of the beautification was more the flowers end of things and, you know, the beds and the hanging baskets. I think that was the beautification, end of it, where that money came from. So that, and I know Prudence had the information, you know, some costing and for benches and that sort of thing. So that was kind of where that went from between 2018 and 2022. I'm not sure, given the state of what's, you know,
Yeah.
the expenses and stuff that's going on in the township. I'm not sure that that's a priority anymore. Anyhow, just a little bit of background there, but honestly, with EdVac, we didn't know we had $12,000 or whatever it was sitting in the account. We didn't know that, or we could have gone out and bought 6 benches and done, you know what I
Could have
mean?
had that
So-
sign uptown.
Exactly. So just a little bit of background there, but, I do agree. I think that we can receive the report. Like Jordan, I'm sorry, and I know it's budget time, it's so busy and so, yeah, don't spend a lot of time, but just kind of take a look at the numbers, maybe a little closer, come back, and then, there. So, the other thoughts?
Yeah, like the only thing from the beautification standpoint I can think of is one of the special events committee members was on the beautification committee.
Which is
Might be able to give us some background on if there was a plan in place, what they were holding money for. Outside of that, yeah,
Counselor Ward.
Thank you through you. Before becoming counselor, I did sit on AdVac from 2014 to 2018.
Oh, there we go.
And there was, I think I missed a couple years, but anyways, I did sit on that committee. It was really focused on economic development by that time because the plants had kind of been taken in-house, the plants were done. So the beautification at that point, and so this is 10 years. So I think we have kind of a generalization of that committee really focused more on AdVac, which is why the beautification got rolled into it. You know what I mean? Because their role was kind of not diminished, but it had changed. And so they rolled it into AdVac beautification. And so I think that's how those two came together. And it really, at that point, really focused more on economic development and the downtown core. I'm sorry to jump in, but that's
Okay.
another 2-3 years worth of info.
All right, well, we've beaten this one around the bush, so I think that we'll receive it for information and try and come back. Jordan, with more information on it if you can.
Do we also want to add about the $10,000 cap? Do you want that in the motion?
Yes, I think you could do that now, the $10,000 cap, and then we'll explain to the committee that that's what's going on forward. And hopefully somebody knows why that money was stocked away.
Like a week fair, sorry, I know we're muddying this all over the place, but boards like the 3 additional requests of boards and committees must budget for reserve transfers. That should still stay.
Yes.
A request be made to move any unused budget for reserve, that could stay.
Yes.
Capping at 10,000 needs to stay.
Yes.
The only thing we want to look at is the 24K that's sitting there for special events. Is there a better breakdown that we can see what's in there to see whether someone could utterly just be pulled back?
What I would suggest, maybe just some more investigate that money and bring back any information.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then all these are staying the same with that added, correct? All right, can I have a mover for that? Counselor Ward, Deputy Mayor Burke. All in favor of that motion? Motion's carried. Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.
That was tougher than the 3 consultants. R4, Alan.
Through you, Mayor. So what I have for you on R4 is an update on what is the old, what we have been referring to as the former old medical center at 31 King Street. So as you may recall, we moved out of there in March. We had somebody approach us who wanted to become a tenant for us later that spring. We set that up. And then shortly after that, we also had the Peterborough Children and Family Center for Centers and the Community Care Peterborough come to us and ask us if they could use some of the other space that was still available. And for about the last 6 months of the year, give or take, they have been working in there. The response we've had from them has been very positive. The response we've had from the community has been very positive. And what they've asked us for is if they could continue to do that for 2025. So we really do consider this one sort of a win-win for everybody, except that it would be nice if they had some revenue or some funds to give us, but we recognize that they don't. But we do value the services that they're bringing in the community. So my recommendation is that, yes, we continue with them at this point. And I would just say, take it at a year to year. We do have a kind of agreement with them that if we were doing something different, we would give them X amount of notice. And they would know, I think they appreciate that because they're not paying rent, they're very grateful for what's being provided, but they know that if something did change, they would be advised, and that would be that. Not that we necessarily see that coming anytime soon, but I wouldn't want to lose sight of that.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions of Alan? No, I'll state the recommended motion that the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood accepts, acknowledges, and approves this report related to usage of the space at the formal medical center, 31 King Street. Mover, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Hodge Greaves, all in favor. Motion's carried. Management action with.
You're gonna, this was gonna be the part where I was gonna say this was the last meeting of the year and congratulate you on the year, but
No,
we have a very strong suspicion that we're going to need to have a special meeting probably sometime in the next 10 days. We have not received our insurance piece in yet. We always like to have that looked after by the end of the year, so that is one I would put out for you that we will follow up once we have what we need, but we would probably need a really quick with one item special meeting on that before the end of the year, so might not be quite your last meeting of the year. We did have quite a bit of information to provide to you today, and I appreciate everybody's patience in getting that to you. When we get into the new year, it seems very strange to be talking about the new year already, but we're almost halfway through December, so I guess it is that time. We do have our first meeting scheduled for January 4th, and there will be a number of sort of what we would call your traditional first, sorry, January 14th, my bad. Yeah, 4th, I will, that's a Saturday, not gonna do that, my bad. So the 14th, and we do have, as is usual in the first year, or first meeting of the year, a number of pieces where we have to get everything looked after to get sort of everything up and going. Again, a lot of forward information stuff on that one, and then I would start to think probably for our meeting on the 28th, we'll start to be able to see more of the meat and potatoes of stuff start to come in.
right. All right, any questions about? All right, council. Oh, sorry.
No,
Deputy
just,
Member.
just you had mentioned about the next short meeting. Do we need a motion to allow that to happen online? Because it just seems silly to set all this up for information on insurance.
It would probably help us if you know that's what you want to do, then I would suggest you make the motion on that. As soon as we get the information and we know how much time we need to be able to do everything properly, because we do still have to do a public notification for it, follow that process, then we can get back to you on what days might work, but if there's consensus that you'd like it to be an online meeting, then we can do that right, you can make that motion right now.
So I'll make the motion that the next special meeting, if called, for the insurance be done in an online form.
Second by Councillor Hodge Greaves. Any further comments? All in favor? That motion's carried. Moving along to the recommended motion that the council accepts this report with the revisions suggested by staff and members of council. Allowance.
Did we call all in favor for the action list?
Oh, sorry. That's what this action list is now, right?
Then we did a motion for a special meeting.
But we didn't have movers on it, did we? On the action?
No, we haven't called that one yet.
Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun. I
Does it
apologize.
matter? It doesn't matter which one, does it?
No, that was the motion before the motion for the action list. That was a separate motion.
All right.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Will you guys rescind your motion here then? And then
No,
we'll just carry on? No, and then you can repeat it right
Oh,
out.
no, do a second motion, that's all.
Okay, second motion that the council accepts this report
Thank you.
with the revisions suggested by staff and members of council, which I was just reading, and he said,
Oh, I thought
"Whoa,
you didn't-
no."
Okay.
Councillor Walsh, Councillor Hodge Greaves, all in favor? That motion's carried. I think we're both carried.
We're good.
Okay, on to correspondence for action. Town Petroleum, OPP billing increases. What's council wishes with respect to C13? Deputy Mayor Burke?
To receive, we've kind of dealt with that.
Yes. Motion to receive, seconder, Councillor Walsh, all in favor? Motion is carried. Town of Midland, it's the same thing. Motion to receive. Motion to receive. And by Walsh and Deputy Mayor Burt, all in favor, motion is carried. Just a question, Alan, I'm gonna ask you this, or Mel, can these not be put together in a motion for all of them when it's all pertaining to the same OPP stuff? Or do they all have to be separate motions?
Through you, Mayor, they came in individually, so that's how we presented them.
Okay,
It is not unusual, we get ones that deal with topics and they're close, but they may not say the exact
same
thing.
thing.
So my recommendation would just be to leave them as
Leave them.
individual ones.
okay. C15, Councillor Hodge Greaves, leave. It's left, sorry. C15. Please. Council Ward.
Yes, to support the comment.
Okay, support with comment, seconded, Councillor Walsh.
Yes, we do have money left in our reserve
Yes.
donation line. Do we know what that amount is? We have a,
For you, Mayor, $3,275.
okay, so plenty of room this year.
Yes.
Is a good thing. So I am in support of that if there's any other comments.
Any other further comment, Deputy Member?
Just a comment, I'm wondering, the event's already happened, so I'm just wondering if a note to the group or committee that, sometimes we don't have funds left at the end of the year and to come, at kind of such a late date. So if they're thinking of doing this as an annual request, they might want to be made aware that, it needs to happen earlier because there's been times where in December, there's nothing left in that fund.
All right,
So just kind of give them a heads up.
Councillor Ward.
Just further to that, I wasn't sure if anybody was able to attend the service and if it was well attended.
Well attended.
Well
A
attended.
lot of people there,
Okay,
more than last year, I would say.
okay,
But then again, the choir was twice the size it looked like, too. Yes.
great. Good to know.
So all in favor of that motion? The motion's carried. And the next one, I'm glad to see for being proactive. Moving ahead to C16, Norwood Agricultural Society, Norwood Fair Vehicle, Highway, Road, and Street Congestion. What's council's wishes with C16? Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, motion to support. I think for us, it's potentially minimal, investment. To assist and definitely, I think at the end of that weekend, getting people off the main thoroughfares, mental fair is a priority for all of us from a safety perspective.
Yes.
As I said, the cost to us is minimal, so, I feel supportable.
All right. Second,
Yeah, second it with a comment.
second with the comment.
Yes, I think it's a win and I love the quote, no field of dreams, it's rather a field of weeds.
Yes.
And we've had that complaint previously, so I think it's a win for everybody having that,
Oh, it is.
that field rehab. So,
Okay, all in favor of that motion? Motion's carried. Council liaison reports. Does anybody have anything else they would like to bring forward? Deputy Mayor Bird.
Thank you. We had 2 county council meetings last week. Bonnie Clark was acclaimed as warden. I'm sure you've seen that. And the deputy warden is once again Sherry Senes. And the following meeting, we also passed the budget, 6.28% tax rate, correct?
Correct.
Sure. And then, that equates to approximately a $66 increase on the average assessed, as we learned all about today, residential unit.
Yes.
Thank you. So, and if you have any questions on the budget and how the amount of work that came to it, that's our finance chair right there.
And we're not done.
Man, it's been a process. Anyway.
Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, through the mayor, to the deputy mayor, if I may, with your liaison report, with the warden being acclaimed, Bonnie Clark, I was wondering if council would be in favor of sending a card of congratulations to her. I think she has supported so many events in the county. It's that report that was in the correspondence. It's remarkable what she attends in a year. So I was just wondering if council would like to send
A letter.
a letter of congrats.
Second that.
Seconded. Moved by Ward, second by Deputy Mayor Bird.
Just voting in favor.
All in favor? I seen all the hands up. Okay, thank you. Any further? General business, does anybody? Sorry,
sorry, through you, Mayor, I do have a bit of a liaison report. I had the last BAC meeting, which was on, December 3rd, which, the mayor attended, and he will be taking over that committee, for the next 2 years. Or sitting on, I shouldn't say taking over. He was sitting on there, that's, and, participated on Thursday evening, with the Westwood Library to do a craft night for children. It was really well attended. And we had, so the committee members braved the morning meeting. We moved up our ANC meeting. We had it at the town offices yesterday. And we had some really good news that we were approved of a grant approval.
Yeah.
More details coming forward. So in January, I'll be able to share more, but that was really good news. And then we also made the motion because we do have a reserve line that we just talked about. And we are going to try to use that this year because it's enough to try to start the digital project for the yard register. So that's all I have.
Anybody further? I could give a liaison report, but this is just moving along to general business. December 14th, this weekend, people, we all know it's holiday night market for the village. And anybody else have any general business? Councilor Walsh?
Just a couple of things, Mayor, for you. We all have probably all received the correspondence from Communities in Bloom on December the 4th. Does that get passed on? I'm just thinking the Horticulture Society, does that get passed on to them, whether there's any interest from them to do anything with that or not?
Know if they have that correspondence or not.
No,
It
it's
should, it
whatever.
could go to the
Should
Horticultural
we,
Society.
should we send it on to them?
Not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea.
And the other thought was, I look at special events, for example, we picked up 2 new members, but we also lost members, so they're still probably in need of a few more. Spoke to one person in the community, said, would you ever just consider allowing people to be volunteers, not necessarily attached to any committee, because they don't want to go to meetings, but they would come and help at events?
Yes.
Is that something we would ever entertain to look at? Whether it was an event going on with the Cultural and Heritage Committee, an event going on with special events, or any other group, that they would just show up and help, and we can always use more hands at events.
With the old.
Is there issues with that?
Through you, Mayor. I fundamentally like the idea. I think you'd want to have some kind of registry.
Yes.
Because if they're out there and they're representing us, we are responsible for them. Normally, we would be looking for a police check. We would be looking to at least have a reasonable idea. They have an understanding of what's being asked, so there'd be a little bit there. But having a registry like that of people who are interested, definitely even the way to tie some of this into the high school hours that are required. That is something, yeah, we'd have to maybe give it some thought, how we were gonna do it. It's not impossible.
No, and that was,
But
I know I
it's not
talked to.
quite as straightforward as
No.
Drew show up and help.
Yeah, no, because I talked to Deputy Mayor Burt about the idea, and it's like, there's a little bit of background would have to be done, but I thought in principle, like you said, it is a good idea, just, we have to get a few things in roll, but just, that's an opportunity for people that don't want to go to meetings, but would glad to come out and help out at an event for a day, and it's the old saying, go as many hands to make light work, so.
Deputy Mayor Burt, did you want-
Thank you. Yeah, just on that, certainly the library has a volunteer policy in place, for students, so, but, that could be a starting point, but there are, different centers, different cities where they have friends of whatever. And that, I think that's how you can get that piece in there to get them covered through, OPP and that sort of thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be friends of the special events committee. It just could be, something a little more formal, but you need that coverage, but I think it's good. A lot of people don't like to sit and, make policy decisions or budget decisions. Let's face it, it's not exciting, but they don't mind, it's not.
They don't
But
mind
they don't
helping out
like
when
coming out
asked.
to help with pumpkin bowling, just for example. So anyhow, good idea.
Councillor Hodgkrees.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I'm thinking of the new committees. What's the plan through you, Mayor, what's the plan for orientation for for them to do? Because I know at the beginning of the previous term, there was an event in the evening and
So through you, Mayor, I have had some conversation with the Economic Development Community Coordinator. Got the title right. And we are not going to do one big event, but we are going to work with each committee because we do have a number of people who come back. We do have a few new ones as well.
Yeah.
We don't want them to feel that they're not being supported.
Yeah.
But we're gonna probably do it on a little bit more individual basis than sort of as a group piece.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need, just circle back, do
Yeah.
we need to send some direction back to you on to?
look into this.
Or look at what a volunteer policy could look like?
If you do, sure, that would formalize it.
So I would put that motion on the floor as we'll request a staff report regarding what a volunteer opportunity could look like for residents in the township.
Moving forward. Councillor Wolf.
I would second that with the addition of maybe students and residents, because not that the students aren't residents, but sometimes if they're at Norwood High School, they're not living in Asphodel-Norwood, but may want to have volunteer hours.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So mover and seconder, all in favor? Motion is carried. We have no closed session, no notice of motion, bylaws, Mel.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. That the bylaws confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of the Council of Township of Asphodel-Norwood, held this day, December 10, 2024. Be read a first, second, and third time in number 2024-56.
Mover. Councillor Hodge Creeves, Deputy Mayor Burt, all in favor? Motion's carried. Future meeting schedule, everybody has seen that. Any problems with the dates that are on there? No. Motion for adjournment. Councillor Walsh. Deputy Mayor Burt, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, councillors.